If I told you that, the absolute most vicious, accurate takedown of today's self-obsessed social media influencers was actually written, like, over 200 years ago.
You'd think it was a setup for a joke.
Right. I mean, it sounds ridiculous because when we picture, the year 1810 in Paris, we immediately just default to the aesthetics of it all.
Oh, absolutely. The glittering chandeliers, the velvet coats.
Yeah, the elaborate ballroom dances and those incredibly rigid rules about, like, exactly how low to bow or which fork you're supposed to use at dinner.
It feels like a world that's just completely obsessed with the superficial. It's so easy to dismiss that era as nothing more than a theater of manners, really.
Exactly.
We look back at the Regency or the Napoleonic era and assume their biggest daily crisis was, a scuffed shoe or a spilled cup of tea.
Right, but beneath all that velvet and lace, they were actually diagnosing the exact same social anxieties, the same toxic personalities, and that same desperate need for validation that you and I have to navigate every single day.
It's honestly kind of shocking how little human nature has changed.
It really is. So welcome to our deep dive. Today, we're looking at this absolutely fascinating snapshot of French high society. It's an etiquette book published in 1810 called L'homme de bonne compagnie, which loosely translates to the man of good company.
And it is just a phenomenal document because it operates on two entirely different levels.
Yeah.
On the surface, sure, it's a manual for survival in a highly scrutinizing society, but its true value is in how utterly ruthless it is about human psychology.
Which is why our mission today is to just, skip the basic table manners entirely. We don't care about the forks.
We can leave the forks behind.
We're going straight into the final, most psychologically rich section of the book, which is part 6. This entire section is dedicated to what the author calls the travers de l'esprit et du cœur, so the flaws of the mind and heart.
And that specific phrasing tells you everything you need to know about the author's real intent.
Oh, for sure.
Flaws of the mind and heart implies we aren't talking about accidental social faux pas here. It's not about spilling wine on your host.
Right.
The author is performing this profound psychological autopsy on why people behave the way they do when they are just desperate to impress everyone around them. It is a study of social posturing and really the absolute terror of inauthenticity.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the author starts this autopsy by drawing a very sharp line in the sand between two distinct types of people, right?
Yes, the foundational distinction of the whole text.
On one side, you have the fat, which is spelled F-A-T, meaning a fop or a coxcomb, essentially someone who is just completely full of
A
themselves.
total narcissist, basically.
Yeah. And on the other side, you have the galant homme, the true gentleman.
And that contrast serves as the bedrock for the entire philosophical argument of the book. The author isn't just saying, oh, one guy is polite and the other is rude.
Right, it goes way deeper than that.
Exactly. He's setting up a dichotomy between a person who lives in reality and a person who lives in a complete delusion.
Well, reading the sketch of the fop, I kept picturing a modern influencer. You know the type.
Oh, we all know the type.
The person who walks into a room and their only concern is like their lighting, their angles, and how they're being perceived by you and everyone else, rather than the actual conversation taking place.
Right.
But what really caught me off guard wasn't just the description of their vanity. It was this claim the author makes that being too infatuated with yourself actually prevents you from having true wit, or what the French call esprit.
Yes.
I mean, I always thought vanity is just a character flaw, like an annoyance. But the text makes it sound like an actual cognitive deficit.
What's fascinating here is that the author is breaking down the literal mechanics of wit. Think about what it actually takes to be witty or to have that esprit.
You have to be paying attention.
Exactly. You have to be deeply observant. You must pay intense attention to the person in front of you, the subtle shifts in the mood of the room, the context of the dialogue. It requires immense mental bandwidth.
So if your brain is entirely occupied with, like, calculating your own appearance.
You have zero processing power left to observe the world around you.
Wow.
Obsession with oneself creates this closed loop in the brain. If you're constantly monitoring how you sound or, how your jawline looks or what impression you're making, you cannot genuinely engage with another human being.
You're just too busy watching yourself.
You are effectively missing the conversational volley because you're too busy admiring your own racket. Vanity doesn't just make you annoying, it literally makes you socially incompetent.
That is such a brutal way to put it, but so accurate.
You become a hollow shell, performing a version of yourself rather than actually participating in the shared reality of the room.
That makes so much sense. I mean, you literally leave no room for anyone else in your brain. And if self-obsession destroys your ability to connect, it creates this incredibly fragile ego that needs constant external validation, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Which naturally pushes us into the next major pitfall the author highlights: the loss of modesty and the delusions of amour propre, or self-love.
And sections 2 and 3 go incredibly hard on this concept. The text discusses how sotte fierté, which is foolish pride, and suffisance, meaning smugness, completely rot social grace from the inside out.
Yeah, the author actually takes a very specific, intense digression on aging and vanity, specifically mentioning women, referred to as personnes du sexe, and their pretensions to beauty.
Right, it gets very pointed there.
Very pointed. The text explicitly points out the duperie et aveuglement volontaire, which translates to gullibility and voluntary blindness when people try to artificially compensate for lost beauty.
And while the gender dynamics are obviously, very 1810, the core psychological insight is entirely about the mechanism of denial.
Yeah.
Voluntary blindness is such a precise term for what happens when someone refuses to accept their current reality, and instead they just retreat into this delusion built by their own ego.
And they want everyone else to live in it with them.
Exactly. They demand that society plays along with this fiction. They want everyone in the room to pretend they are still the absolute center of the universe.
Well, that demand brings up a phrase in the text that absolutely stopped me in my tracks. The author warns that this behavior invites the vengeance du public, or the vengeance of the public.
A great phrase.
It's so dramatic. Now, I have to challenge this a bit,
Mm-hmm.
because vengeance sounds like, an angry mob with pitchforks.
Right.
Why would the public actively seek vengeance just because someone is vain or clinging to their youth? That seems like an aggressive overreaction to someone who's just a bit pathetic. Like,
Yeah.
why not just ignore them?
It does sound aggressive until you understand the hidden social contract we all unconsciously participate in. Society is actually quite forgiving of many things.
True.
We'll tolerate eccentricity, we'll tolerate ignorance if it's honest, we'll even tolerate a bit of rudeness sometimes, but society actively and aggressively punishes inauthenticity.
Why? Because it feels like a manipulation.
Precisely because it forces everyone else to lie. When someone is operating out of that voluntary blindness and implicitly demanding that you validate their delusion, it feels like an insult to the collective intelligence of the room.
Like they're making you an accomplice.
Exactly. You are being forced to participate in their play just as an extra, just to keep their ego from shattering.
I see. It's the sheer entitlement of it that makes people mad.
The vengeance the author describes isn't a literal mob. It's the silent withdrawal of social grace. It's the behind-the-back mockery, the subtle ostracization, the collective eye roll when you leave the room.
Ouch.
The public takes vengeance simply by refusing to mirror back the illusion you are so desperate to project. It's a harsh, collective corrective mechanism designed to force people out of their delusions and back into shared reality.
Wow, so it's basically the 19th century equivalent of the collective cringe reflex.
Yes. Perfect analogy.
Like, we cringe when we see someone performing inauthentically online today, and that cringe is a form of social projection. But vanity about your physical looks is really just one layer here.
It is.
Because the text immediately pivots to something the author finds even more insidious, which is faking your inner virtues and your physical sensitivities.
And this is where the psychological autopsy gets even sharper, honestly. Sections 4 and 5 just bring the hammer down on performative fragility.
Yes, the author critiques bagalism, which translates to a sort of extreme prunishness and misplaced reserve, linking it to the effects of a poorly managed education.
Right.
The text uses this incredible phrase, false délicatesse d'organes, or false delicacy of the senses, and he calls these people sybarites.
Yes.
When I read that, my mind immediately went to modern people who fake extreme sensitivities just to appear, like sophisticated or special to you and everyone around them.
Oh, absolutely.
The person who makes a huge show of not being able to tolerate the lighting in a restaurant or claiming their highly refined palate can only accept the most obscure ingredients.
We all know someone who constructs their entire personality around being uniquely sensitive. And the author recognizes this not as an actual medical or psychological sensitivity, but as a mechanism of control.
Control? How so? Because to me, it seems like they're just playing the victim.
But by playing the victim of their own refined senses, they dictate the terms of the entire environment.
Oh, wow.
Think about it. If I have false delicacy, the entire room has to tiptoe around my manufactured needs. The lighting must be be changed for me. The conversation has to be altered so as not to offend my delicate sensibilities.
Right.
It is a brilliant, passive-aggressive way of centering oneself while pretending to be completely fragile and unassuming.
It's the ultimate narcissism disguised as modesty. You force everyone to cater to you while claiming you barely take up any space at all.
Precisely.
But the author reserves the most brutal criticism for a specific type of social performer who weaponizes these fake virtues, right? Yeah, les Aimables du Jour.
Ah, yes. The so-called charming men of the day. And the author deploys one of the most memorable metaphors in the entire book for them. Geais, parés, des plumes du paon.
Jays adorned in peacock feathers.
Jays in peacock feathers.
Such a good image. A common, noisy bird dressing itself up in the majestic feathers of another.
Yes.
In the context of the Parisian salons of 1810, these are the hommes à bonne fortune, the serial seducers, the ladies' men.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the author is issuing a timeless warning about the danger of superficial charm.
Yeah.
The jay in peacock feathers is the individual who has entirely mastered the aesthetic of goodness, the vocabulary of romance, or the posture of intellect, but possesses absolutely zero substance underneath. They're entirely composed of borrowed feathers.
So they know the script flawlessly, but they don't actually feel the emotion.
Exactly.
And the text explicitly points out the collateral damage they leave behind, which is femmes trompées or deceived women. It makes me wonder, though, if these guys are just noisy birds in fake feathers, why are so many smart people falling for them?
Because the feathers are designed to exploit our own desires, society is easily dazzled by the display.
We want the fantasy.
We want to believe in the majestic peacock. We want to believe someone is really that romantic or that intellectual or that morally pure. The tragedy of the Aimables du Jour is that society often rewards them heavily in the short term.
Right, because they're loud and shiny.
The authentic galant homme might go completely unnoticed in a crowded room because he isn't putting on a fireworks display.
The peacock gets all the attention, while the genuine person is just standing by the punch bowl.
Exactly.
Well, recognizing these jays in peacock feathers leads us perfectly into the author's strict warnings about how we actually communicate.
Yes.
Because if the peacock is communicating entirely through deception and stolen language, what is the right way to connect with people? The author has a whole section titled Erreur des séducteurs, the error of seducers.
And this is where the text moves from philosophical observation to highly practical advice on the actual mechanics of communication.
The author claims that the real way to please honest women, and by extension, anyone of quality in society, is ruined by sought affectation, foolish affectation, and ignorance.
Yes.
Seducers try too hard. They put on a weird voice. They use overly florid language. They lean in too close, and it just reeks of desperation.
They overplay their hand, believing that more effort equals more charm.
Let me push back on this, though.
Okay.
If affectation and trying too hard are the ultimate seduction killers, what is the author's proposed alternative? Like, do I just sit in the corner and stay quiet?
Right.
Do I become the brooding, silent, mysterious type who makes everyone guess what I'm thinking?
It's a very logical assumption to make. If noise is bad, silence must be good. But the author anticipates that exact conclusion and completely shoots it down.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the text explicitly calls out silent shoes, silent people as just as problematic as the overactors.
Why is silence a problem?
Because strategic silence is often just another form of affectation. It's a manufactured mystery designed to make people project their own fantasies onto you. The true alternative to affectation isn't silence, it's clarity. The text explicitly demands netteté et précision dans le langage. Clarity and precision in language.
Clarity and precision. I have to be honest, that sounds like advice for drafting a legal contract, not a romantic overture or a witty conversation at a party, I find you charming with an 80% margin of error.
Right, it sounds clinical, but think about it until you look at the mechanism of manipulation. How does a seducer or manipulator of any kind actually operate?
By being vague.
Exactly. They use vague, flowery, ambiguous language to create a fog, and that fog provides them with plausible deniability. They can hint at commitments they never intend to keep, or imply depths they don't actually possess.
The borrowed peacock feathers are basically made of vague promises.
Yes. When you force clarity and precision into the dialogue, you turn on a massive spotlight that burns away that fog. Good sense and good grace are described in the text as the true short elements of politeness. When you speak with precision, you are stripping away your own ability to manipulate.
You're just putting it all out there.
You are presenting your actual thoughts honestly to the person in front of you. It is deeply respectful because you aren't making them play a guessing game. True connection doesn't require a fog of mysterious silence, and it definitely doesn't require a fireworks display of affectation.
It requires two people standing in the light, communicating with unpretentious honesty.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. When you look at all the rules we've discussed, you can't be a self-obsessed fop with no mental bandwidth.
Right.
You can't be vain and invite the vengeance of the public. You can't fake delicacy to control a room. You can't be a jay in peacock feathers. You shouldn't try too hard to seduce, but you also can't just sit there in brooding silence.
It's a lot.
Balancing all of these contradictory pressures seems mathematically impossible.
It requires an absolute masterclass in social calibration, which brings us to the climax of the sources argument and really the entire philosophy of 1810 social dynamics, the concept of the just milieu,
The happy medium.
the golden mean. It is the hardest place to live in any society. It is the exact razor-thin center point between too much and not enough.
Well, the text mentions the art of making your advantages and talents valued, and I find that nuance crucial. Because the author doesn't say you should hide your light under a bushel or pretend you aren't smart or talented or beautiful.
No, not at all.
You are supposed to showcase your talents. But there is an art to doing it without crossing into the obnoxious territory of the jay in peacock feathers.
It is the subtle difference between sharing a gift with a room and demanding applause from the room.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
The just milieu is about contributing your talents to elevate the collective experience of everyone present. The fop, on the other hand, uses their talents as a bludgeon to establish dominance and feed their own ego.
It's the difference between telling a funny story so everyone can laugh together versus telling a funny story so everyone knows you are the funniest person in the room.
That is the precise distinction. And the just milieu requires a dynamic, constant recalibration. You don't just find the golden mean and park there.
Right.
You are constantly reading the room, which you can do because you aren't obsessed with yourself and adjusting your output. You dial up your wit when the energy lulls, and you pull back to listen when someone else has the floor.
So what does this all mean? Bringing all this out of the 19th century Parisian salons and into your real world. Whether you are navigating a brutal corporate boardroom, attending a dinner party, or trying to take an authentic impression on a networking call, the ultimate tool is exactly what this book advocates, mastering the ton de la bonne compagnie, the tone of good company.
And that tone is a balanced, modest, yet highly engaging presence. It is possessing the esprit to read the room, the courage to communicate with clarity rather than affectation, and the self-awareness to avoid the illusions of your own ego. Because knowledge is really only valuable when it's applied. This isn't just an old book, it's a blueprint for today.
We've just swapped out the velvet coats and chandeliers for ring lights and smartphones, but the underlying mechanics of human ego haven't changed one single bit.
No, they haven't.
To recap the journey we've taken through part 6 of this incredible manual, we learn to dodge the trap of the self-obsessed fop, whose vanity literally blinds them to the world and drains the processing power needed for true wit.
Right.
We saw how a fragile ego demands the room lie for it, inviting the brutal vengeance of the public. We learned to spot the jays in peacock feathers who use superficial charm and false delicacy to manipulate. And ultimately, we discovered that the antidote to all of this isn't brooding silence, but the clarity, precision, and dynamic balance of the just milieu.
It is a rigorous, demanding standard for how to live alongside other people. And it leaves us with a fascinating, almost unsettling question to consider about our own era.
What's that?
Well, we talked extensively about the vengeance of the public in 1810, that cold societal exclusion for those who fell for their own illusions and refused to be authentic. Society punished the peacock once the feathers fell off.
Right, the social mockery for the voluntarily blind.
But look at the architecture of our modern world. In an environment governed by algorithms that explicitly reward the most outrageous, performative, and visually arresting behaviors, does the vengeance of the public even exist anymore?
Oh, wow.
Or have we built a society that actively punishes the gallant homme? If the true gentleman's greatest strength is his quiet, clear precision and his refusal to put on borrowed feathers, is he destined to be completely drowned out by a global feed of screeching jays? Are we living in the first era in human history where the tone of good company is actually an evolutionary disadvantage?
That is a phenomenal, terrifying thought to chew on. Has the algorithm made the peacock the permanent king of the salon? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep observing, keep questioning the world around you, and we'll see you next time.